Our opening thought comes from Sophia Betancourt from Love at the Center, Unitarian Universalist Theologies. It's just one sentence. Given everything our world faces today, having faith in love is no small thing. Our next reading comes from Victoria Safford from Beloved, an excerpt from the book Love at the Center. Now and here in this unlikely, perhaps unreplicated, gorgeous world, this shimmering, sorrowing world, this world in which we exist together, no scientist, no sorcerer, no sacred text can ever fully tell us why or how it's happened, this existence. Whether we ask our whole lives long in the idiom of astrophysics or a child's bedazzled wonder, we are here now, and we all belong. Beloved. And therefore, my work, however imperfect at the end of each day, my work and my joy is to strive to act accordingly, as if in your presence, whoever you are, wherever on this earth you are, I were in the presence of the holy. I have no other words to describe it. This love that guides us, calls us, heals us, and holds us in its hands. Our next reading comes from the UU Purposes and Covenant. The Unitarian Universalist Association will actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Over the past 6 times that I have been with you, we have reflected on the 6 shared values of Unitarian Universalism that were adopted at the 2024 UUA General Assembly. And those 6 values, those 6 shared values are 1, and in no particular order, interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence and acknowledge our place in it. The second one is pluralism. We are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. The third is justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all feel welcome and can thrive. Transformation is the next one. We adapt to the changing world. And then generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. And then the 6th is equity. We declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. And today, I'm reflecting on how love is at the center of all of these shared values. And this is what the UUA General Assembly adopted, that love is at the center of all of these shared values, like a thread that weaves and holds them together in a tapestry of solidarity that works for love and justice for all persons and for all life. When times are as chaotic as they are now, we need this commitment to building the beloved community by keeping love at the center. The purveyors of chaos in our world count on the forces of beloved community in the world to be weak and to lack persistence. But we know that love and justice have power. Love and justice have power to be both resilient and regenerative if we keep love at the center. Perhaps one of the greatest moral challenges of our time, this is a very difficult one, is for us to remain kind and compassionate with one another in the midst of the chaos that we as humanity keep creating. How do we keep love at the center? How do we keep love at the center and unravel the blanket of systemic chaos by which we are covered while simultaneously creating a new quilt of beloved community? When persons or groups use depersonalizing and dehumanizing rhetoric about others, we rightly get angry. It's good to get angry when that happens. We may feel right and justified in responding, though, in a like manner to them. We might want to call them names. We might want to kindle the fires of hatred within us. But all that does is it perpetuates the dehumanizing spiral towards chaos away from the beloved community. Anger is not wrong, but how we direct that anger is going to be the key by keeping love at the center. We must resist the temptation to fight the propaganda of depersonalization with even more depersonalizing propaganda. We commit ourselves to keep love at the center. There are times when anger is both appropriate and necessary in our responses to systemic injustices in the world, like the quadruple evils of racism, poverty, violence, and ecological degradation that we experience. But it's also possible to be angry about these systemic injustices without losing our love, without losing our compassion for persons and for all life. It's possible to be angry with individual persons and groups of persons without dehumanizing them. It's possible to keep love at the center. Creating a beloved community is nearly impossible if we allow ourselves to become so polarized that we fail to be critical about ourselves, that we fail to be critical about our own perspectives. The squashing of dissent by the argument that it might help the cause of those we perceive as being on the other side is a sign of a deeply flawed community, and it's also the sign of a deeply flawed democracy. Keeping love at the center entails being open to self-reflection and even open to self-correction for the sake of building the beloved community. Many societies, past and present, have fallen into patterns and are continuing to fall into patterns and practices that are not healthy, desirable, or good for persons or for the planet. It's in times like these that it is even more imperative that we work together to keep love at the center, to express love, to do justice and provide support for one another. Even in the darkest of times, it's important to keep shining the light of love and justice in the world, to keep love in the center, even if that love is only a flicker of light. It can still provide comfort. It can still provide hope. And we can only do this if we are intentional about keeping love at the center. Whatever our orientation to religion might be, it must not be allowed to become a cover for the justification of hate and injustice. Any belief system that requires we see differences in the sacred worth of persons as becoming a situation where they have lesser value. Anytime that becomes a source of injustice within the community, then religion is at its worst. Religious communities are at their best, however, when they model ways of being a more fully inclusive human community through love and through justice for all. And they are certainly at their worst when they use fear and exclusion of others to gain and expand power to further their own narrow ethno-cultural interests, which we see so often with Christian nationalism and other forms of religious nationalism throughout the world. Religious communities are at their best when they keep love at the center. We know that some of the most powerful movements for justice in the history of humanity were led by persons who kept love at the center, led by persons who did not feed what Howard Thurman called those three hounds of hell: fear, deception, and hatred, but who forged a path of courage, truth, and love, who kept love at the center. As satisfying as it may feel, and I know it can feel very satisfying to fuel the fires of hatred for the purveyors of injustice, that will not be the way to defeating injustice. We must communicate and live out a compelling vision that moves us all towards a just and beloved community. The most effective way to overcome hate and fear is not through more hate and fear, but rather through love and hope. The most effective way to overcome hate and fear is to keep love at the center, expressed through solidarity with the most vulnerable among us. The power of nonviolence and love to bring about significant systemic change within human communities has been underestimated over and over again throughout our history by those who use violence and force and fear to maintain their power. It's only through the power of love that we can cultivate a truly just and sustainable community. We will never get there. We will never get where we need to be through hate and fear. And even though love and nonviolence and hope and justice have been underestimated over and over again in the history of humanity, they have a power that somehow tends to stay alive, that somehow brings transformation over and over again within our lives. The powerhouse people for good in human history have realized this. They have realized that the only way to overcome the power of hate and fear is through love and courage in the pursuit of justice. We are called to a hope that a love force ultimately has more power in the world than the force of hate, even if it may not always look that way in the short run. Some of the most powerful shapers of human history have used the least amount of violence because they recognize that true power for good comes from the force of love and justice, not from the use of violent force, from the force of keeping love at the center. Gandhi, Dorothy Day, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Thich Nhat Hanh, Desmond Tutu, Wangari Maathai, and many others did not have their power through brute strength or through physical force. They had their power through the force of love, a force of justice that changed the world during their lives and that continues to transform the world for good today and even into the future. True power, power for good, comes from keeping love at the center. And one of the greatest actions of faith, hope, and love and courage that we can do, that we can be involved in, is to work for the creation of just and beloved community, even though we ourselves may never get to see it, even though it may not come to full fruition in our lives. It's our way of expressing love for all who are and all who are yet to come, just as so many have done who have lived before us. It is also one of the greatest ways that we can love and respect those who have worked for love and justice through the ages, to continue their work today and into the future. If we keep love at the center of our lives so that love may also be at the center of all the lives that are to come, we will bring into fruition the beloved community, even those lives that will exist long after we are gone. Although we may no longer be physically present with the generations to come, our love will forever remain with them. I believe that every act of love and kindness and justice is ultimately not lost. I believe that every act of love and kindness and justice is ultimately saved and is saving. They all find ways, sometimes small and sometimes large, to make a positive difference in the world, even when it seems that the world is not taking note. Every act of love and justice is good in itself, but it can also become a seed for something greater to grow and to potentially flourish. Keeping love at the center does not mean holding on to false or unrealistic hope. There's no guarantee that it is not too late to avoid some kind of catastrophic collapse of our human civilization, of our economy, of the ecosystems of which we are a part. As individuals, much of what would lead to such collapse is completely out of our control, but we do have some element of control about how we live our own lives in the midst of this chaos. And I want to suggest that the best way to live in times such as these is to keep love at the center, to love others no matter what. In a world of hate, fear, chaos, and division, we need people who will love others no matter what, to help plant the seeds of hope that new life and beloved community might somehow break through. May we find the strength in these extremely troubling times, to avoid feeding those hounds of hell, of fear, deception, and hatred, but rather gain courage to leave a legacy of love and justice, with love at the center, expressed in solidarity with the most vulnerable among us. May it be so.